was 17 years old, living in Albuquerque, New Mexico with my parents. They had gone on a business trip for a few days, leaving me home alone. For many teenagers, this would be the perfect opportunity to do whatever they wanted, but I was just planning to enjoy my time playing video games and relaxing. Our house was in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by trees and families who had known each other for years. It was the kind of place where everyone greeted each other on the street, and most of the time, nothing exciting happened. Our home was spacious and comfortable, with a large backyard where I often played basketball. That afternoon, my mom had asked me to go to the grocery store and pick up a few things before she and my dad returned. It was a task I did regularly, so I didn't think much of it. The local grocery store was a familiar place with employees who knew me by name. I felt safe and at ease there, like I was part of the community. After grabbing all the items on my mom's list, I headed to the checkout line. While waiting, I noticed a man standing behind me. At first glance, he seemed normal, with an old baseball cap and a worn jacket, but something about his behavior unsettled me. He was standing too close, invading my personal space, and seemed to be talking to himself. I tried to ignore him and continued placing my groceries on the conveyor belt, but he started talking to me, making random comments about the weather and the things I was buying. His words were harmless, but the tone and the way he kept his eyes fixed on me were uncomfortable. I forced a smile and replied politely, hoping he would stop, but he didn't. Even when I paid for my groceries and started to leave, he kept talking, following me to the store exit. "I'll see you around," he said, with a smile I couldn't quite read. Quickening my pace, I finally reached my car, feeling relieved to leave the store behind. I tried not to think too much about what had happened, convincing myself it was just a weird guy. Strange people show up every now and then, and usually it's nothing. Still, a part of me couldn't forget the way he looked at me. Back home, I felt a sense of relief as I closed the door behind me, leaving the strange encounter at the grocery store behind. It felt good to be in my own space, where everything was safe and familiar. I tossed the grocery bags in the kitchen, put everything away, and immediately started thinking about how I would spend the rest of the evening. I was excited to play Call of Duty Black Ops on my computer. Gaming was my favorite way to relax and forget about anything that was bothering me. Today, the plan was to spend a few hours online with my friend Johnny. He and I were shooting Game Fanatics, and we had spent countless hours playing together. After heading upstairs to my room, I turned on the computer and put on my headphones, already immersed in the familiarity of the digital environment. Johnny soon appeared online, and we started an intense session of matches. The sound of gunfire and explosions mixed with the laughter and banter we exchanged. As the matches progressed, time seemed to fly by. We had been playing for quite a while when my stomach started to growl. I decided it was time to take a break for dinner, something quick and easy to prepare, as I didn't want to spend too much time away from the game. "Hold on, Johnny. I'm taking a dinner break," I said in the voice chat. "I'll be back in 10 minutes. I quickly ran downstairs, leaving my room lit and the game paused. In the kitchen, I made a simple sandwich, thinking about strategies for the next match. As I ate, the house was eerily silent. It was something I wasn't used to, as there was usually some noise coming from the living room TV or the chatter of my parents. While eating my sandwich in the kitchen, the house remained quiet, except for the occasional sounds of the refrigerator and the gentle breeze outside. At that moment, I was alone with my thoughts, recalling the strange encounter at the grocery store and chuckling to myself at how weird the situation had been. Then, I heard a noise coming from upstairs. It sounded like something had fallen or moved suddenly. I paused for a moment, listening intently, but the sound didn't repeat. Probably just the wind, I thought, trying to convince myself that nothing was wrong. Maybe I had left my bedroom window open, and the wind was pushing some light object. It wasn't the first time something like that had happened. Just to be safe, I decided to get up and check the front door. I unlocked it briefly and checked the street, which was completely deserted. The silence in the neighborhood was almost absolute, except for a few distant crickets. Once I felt secure, I closed the door again, turning the key in the lock more carefully. An extra barrier for any unforeseen events. After feeling that I had done my part in ensuring security, I headed back upstairs to my room. Each step was a reminder that I was about to dive back into the gaming world. The computer was still on, waiting for me, and the monitor's light gently illuminated the room. I sat down in the chair, adjusted my headphones, and resumed talking to Johnny, who was already impatient to start the next match. "Took you long enough. Were you making a feast?" He joked. No, just a sandwich. Ready to lose a few more matches? I replied, trying to lighten the mood and push away any lingering worries about the noise from earlier. As we got back into the game, the familiarity and focus on tactics completely distracted me. I was immersed in a world where the only thing that mattered was the next victory. The feeling of being at home, protected, gave me comfort and security, unaware that the real challenge was yet to come, not in the game, but in the reality surrounding me. In the middle of an intense Call of Duty match, something pulled me out of my zone of concentration. A strange feeling hit me, like a shadow had passed through my field of vision. I kept playing for a few seconds, but the discomfort didn't go away. I looked at my bedroom door, noticing it was slightly ajar. I was sure I had closed it when I came in. My heart started to race. I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me, and a chill ran down my spine. The match was still going, and Johnny was giving orders and discussing strategy. But everything around me seemed to be in slow motion. I decided to stop for a moment, taking off my headphones and slowly turning the chair. What I saw paralyzed me instantly. There, sitting on the edge of my bed, was the man from the grocery store. He was looking directly at me, with that same unsettling smile that had made me uncomfortable earlier. His eyes were locked onto mine, and he seemed completely at ease, as if he were an old acquaintance or someone who belonged there. Shock took over, freezing any immediate reaction. My thoughts were a whirlwind of fear and confusion. How did he get in here? What does he want? Why is he in my room? Who are you? What are you doing here? I managed to stammer, my voice faltering with fear. He didn't respond immediately, just tilted his head slightly, as if considering his words. That pause gave me enough time to break the paralysis I was in. Adrenaline started to course through my body, and the need to act took control. In one swift movement, I stood up from the chair, pushing it back forcefully. Get out of here! I'm calling the police! I shouted, my voice coming out louder and firmer than I expected. The man remained calm, but his eyes never left me. The sense of imminent danger was palpable, and I knew I needed to get out of there. I ran for the door, still shouting as I tried to keep as much distance between us as possible. I rushed down the stairs as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest, as images of the man on my bed replayed in my mind. I needed to get away from him, get out of that house, and find safety. Behind me, I heard heavy footsteps following mine, but I didn't stop to look back. The only thing that mattered was reaching the front door, getting out of that surreal situation, and calling for help. I was in a state of panic as I ran down the stairs, hearing the man's footsteps close behind. When I reached the front door, adrenaline gave me a brief relief as I opened the door and ran out into the yard. I turned around, expecting him to be right behind me, but instead I saw him calmly descending the stairs. He walked towards me with slow, deliberate steps, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. I backed away further, keeping a safe distance but watching his every move. Then he stopped at the entrance, gave one last look around, and walked out the front door. The man didn't seem to be in any hurry, as if he was confident that no one would stop him. He left through the same door that, I realized, I had left unlocked. My mistake now seemed like a cruel irony, and the anger at myself was almost unbearable. When he finally disappeared down the street, I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and called my parents. The line rang for what felt like an eternity before my mom answered, her voice full of joy that quickly vanished when she heard the panic in mine. Mom, there's someone in the house. A man got in and was in my room. My voice was breaking with fear and I was shaking uncontrollably. What? Are you okay? Where are you now? My mom asked, her voice filled with worry and urgency. He just left. I'm outside. He walked out the front door. I don't know what to do, I replied, trying to stay calm as tears threatened to fall. Stay there. Call the police. We're coming back right now. I heard my dad in the background, already planning our return. After hanging up, I stayed on the sidewalk for a while, watching the deserted street and the house that suddenly seemed so strange and threatening. My heart was still racing, and my mind was a jumble of questions and emotions. I wondered if I should have done something differently, if it was safe to go back into the house or wait until my parents arrived. Finally, I mustered enough courage to go back inside. I tried to rationalize the situation. The man was gone, there was no sign of a struggle, and the most important thing was to make sure everything was okay before my parents arrived. I walked through the house cautiously, checking every room. My breathing was the only sound I heard as I opened doors and turned on lights. The bedroom, where he had been, seemed unchanged. The bed was the same as I had left it, the chair still on the floor after I had pushed it back. However, no matter how much I searched, there was no sign that anything had been taken or broken. No object was out of place. Nothing seemed to have been touched. It was as if he just wanted to be there, watching, and that made me even more uncomfortable. The reality of what had happened began to set in when I returned to the living room. The house was silent, but my mind couldn't stop racing with questions and conflicting emotions. I felt exposed and foolish for leaving the door unlocked. I was alone, and my confidence in being safe in my own home had been shaken. Everything I thought was secure suddenly seemed like an illusion. That man entered my life and left without leaving any physical traces, but the psychological impact was deep. I knew then that I would never feel completely safe in my own home again, especially when I was alone. When my parents finally arrived, I was sitting on the stairs, still trying to process what had happened. They hugged me, and I explained everything again, still with adrenaline pumping through my veins. Later, as we were together, I reflected on what had happened. I knew I would never be so careless about security again. That man, with his disturbing smile, taught me a painful lesson, and as much as I wanted to forget, I knew it would stay with me for a long time. In the end, the fear gave way to a quiet determination to be more careful, more vigilant, to never let something like this happen again. And while the incident had traumatized me, I also knew I was strong enough to overcome the fear and move on. In 2010, life was quite different for a 13-year-old boy who spent hours exploring virtual worlds on his computer. Like many teens my age, I was an avid fan of online games. Afternoons and weekends were spent in front of my monitor, in a universe where monsters and heroes faced off in epic battles, far beyond the monotonous routine of school and homework. My refuge was an MMORPG called GONU, a game that blended fantasy and strategy, allowing players to form alliances and fight against common enemies. In GONU, I wasn't just Jake, the middle school student. I was Shadowblade, a fearless warrior with skills that many envied. It was amazing how the computer screen transported me to another world, where I could be anything I wanted. I discovered GONU through a classmate who was also a gaming enthusiast. He told me about the game during a school break, describing it as a vast world full of adventures. I decided to try it out as soon as I got home, and I was quickly hooked. The game offered the chance to explore dungeons, complete quests, and, most importantly, interact with other players from around the world. It was in GONU that I met Medusa, a player with whom I quickly developed a special friendship. Medusa claimed to be a 15-year-old girl named Teresa. We talked daily, both in the game and in chat outside of it. She seemed to share many of my interests, and our bond grew rapidly. Teresa would tell me about her life, how she lived in another city, and was as passionate about games as I was. Our virtual meetups became an essential part of my day. I didn't have many friends at school, so my connection with Teresa was valuable to me. We talked about game updates, exchanged strategies to tackle new challenges, and even shared details about our daily lives. Teresa supported me when I was upset about something, and I did the same for her. She was fun and smart, and the idea of having such a close friend was exciting. The friendship became so strong that we started joking about meeting in person one day. It would be amazing to explore the real world, like we explore GONU, Teresa would say in our conversations. As time passed, our talks about meeting up became more serious. Teresa suggested that we could meet on a weekend when my parents were away. My parents often traveled for work, so there were opportunities for this. I was thrilled with the idea, and we agreed to plan the meetup the next time my parents were out. "I can come to your city, it's not that far, and it would be incredible to finally meet you," Teresa wrote in a message. It was a tempting proposition. On one hand, I was excited to finally meet my virtual friend, but on the other, there was a nagging unease in me that I couldn't completely ignore. I decided to let time pass to see if it was really a good idea. When my parents told me they would be away the following weekend, I mentioned it to Teresa, saying it would be the perfect opportunity. She was excited and suggested we confirm the details later. The idea of having someone over without my parents knowing gave me a sense of independence and adventure. As the weekend approached, I began to imagine what it would be like to finally meet Teresa. I was eager, but also a bit nervous because I knew it was a big responsibility. Deep down, I felt there was something special about this friendship that was worth exploring in the real world. In this introduction, Jake is presented as a typical teenager who finds refuge in an online world, developing an important friendship that soon transcends virtual boundaries. This story promises to take an unexpected turn as the meeting approaches. I could hardly believe the day had finally arrived. Meeting Teresa was something I had been eagerly anticipating for weeks. Since we started chatting online, our connection had felt intense and genuine. Teresa was smart, funny, and always seemed to understand what I was thinking, almost like she could read my mind. Now, she was coming to my house, and my anxiety was through the roof. I spent the entire morning tidying up the house, making sure everything was perfect. My room was spotless, with the posters neatly arranged and the bed made like never before. I even bought some drinks and snacks she had mentioned liking. Everything had to be just right. As I waited, I kept thinking about how the meeting would go. What would I say? What if there was an awkward silence? What if we weren't as compatible in person as we were online? These doubts mingled with excitement, creating a storm of emotions inside me. The clock seemed to drag, every second an eternity, as I waited for the doorbell to ring. And then, finally, it rang. My heart leaped in my chest, and I rushed toward the door, trying to appear calm and nonchalant. I opened the door with a smile on my face, expecting to see Teresa on the other side, but what I found made me freeze in place. Instead of Teresa, a man stood there, a disturbing smile plastered on his face. He had a disheveled appearance, with wrinkled clothes and eyes that didn't seem to blink. For a second, I thought maybe it was a mistake, that he was at the wrong house. "Hey, you must be Jake's little brother," he said in a rough, almost melodic voice. "Nice to finally meet you." I was speechless, unsure of what to say. Fear began to take hold of me, a cold sensation creeping down my spine. Who was this man? And why did he know about me and my older brother? "I'm Medusa," he said, leaning in a little closer. "You don't recognize the name? We've talked a lot." The revelation hit me like a punch in the gut. Medusa was the name Teresa used in the online chat, a name that had seemed like a playful and fun choice until now. The realization that I had been deceived set in, bringing with it an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. Before I could think, my instincts kicked in. I slammed the door shut with all my strength, trying to block out the sight of the man on the other side. My heart was pounding frantically, and my mind raced to come up with a plan. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and tried to call my older brother. Jake always knew what to do in tough situations, and I desperately needed his guidance now. The call went to voicemail, each ring driving me deeper into despair. Without a second thought, I ran to my parents' bedroom and locked the door behind me. My thoughts were a mess as I tried to find a way to escape or call the police. I looked around, searching for something I could use as a weapon or shield. On the other side of the door, I heard the man start talking again, his voice a mix of sweetness and threat. "Hey, I just want to talk," he said. "We have a connection, remember? There's no reason to be scared." His attempt to sound reassuring only heightened the terror I felt. I knew I had to keep the door shut and find a way to protect myself until I could get help. The tension in the air was palpable, and time seemed to drag as I waited for any sign that the man had given up or left. I knew I needed to act quickly, but fear kept me paralyzed, each second an eternity, as I tried to think of the next move. Terrified and unsure of what to do, Tyson didn't know how to react as he stared at the man from the grocery store, now sitting on his bed with a disturbing smile on his face. The intruder didn't seem in any hurry to leave and maintained a threatening presence. Tyson knew he needed help, but he was alone, and the police hadn't arrived yet. Suddenly, Tyson heard the sound of a car pulling up. It was his older brother, Lucas, who had gone out with some friends earlier. Tyson had never been so relieved to hear the front door opening and familiar voices echoing through the house. Tyson yelled for help with all the strength he had. "Lucas, up here!" The intruder, realizing he was no longer alone with Tyson, quickly stood up and tried to leave the room. But before he could escape, Lucas and his friends rushed up the stairs. Lucas entered Tyson's room first, followed by his friends, and was shocked to see the strange man. Without hesitation, he confronted the intruder. "Hey, who are you? What are you doing here?" Lucas's friends surrounded the man, forming a barrier between him and Tyson. The intruder, seeing that he was outnumbered, began to back away, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble," the man said, trying to appear harmless as he backed toward the door. "Get out of here before the police arrive," one of Lucas's friends threatened, his fists clenched, ready to act if necessary. The intruder quickly bolted down the stairs, pushing the front door open to make his escape, fleeing into the night. Lucas and his friends chased him to the sidewalk, but the man was already gone. As soon as the intruder disappeared, Tyson collapsed to the floor in his room, trembling with relief and fear. Lucas came back and knelt beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "It's okay now, man," Lucas said, his voice firm but gentle. "He's gone, don't worry." Tyson nodded, trying to steady his breathing as the emotions of the night finally caught up with him. He couldn't believe how close he had come to a potentially dangerous situation, and the presence of his brother brought a sense of safety he hadn't felt since the nightmare began. As things calmed down, Tyson started to process what had happened. The shock of the encounter with the intruder turned into a deeper reflection on vulnerability. He thought about the series of events that led to that terrifying night, the strange encounter at the grocery store, his carelessness in leaving the door unlocked, and how easily someone had gotten into his house. The online world, where he spent so much time gaming and connecting with friends, suddenly seemed less secure. Tyson realized he needed to be more careful not just with his physical safety, but also with how he interacted and shared information online. He understood that the vulnerability he experienced could have real-world consequences. When the police finally arrived to take his statement, Tyson was surrounded by his brother and friends, all offering support and comfort. As he spoke with the officers, he couldn't help but feel grateful that Lucas and his friends had arrived in time. Tyson looked at Lucas, who had been by his side the entire time, and felt a wave of gratitude. Without him, things could have ended very differently. He leaned in and gave his brother a tight hug, which Lucas returned with a warm smile. "Thanks, Lucas. I don't know what I would have done without you." Lucas gave Tyson a light pat on the back, saying, "Don't worry, bro. We're always here to protect you." The relief of knowing he was safe and that the intruder had been driven away gave Tyson a new perspective. He knew he needed to be more vigilant and careful in the future, but he also knew he had a brother and friends he could rely on, and that made all the difference. My name is Ju, and I recently decided to take a break from a popular game I'd been playing for years. The competitiveness and drama of the online environment were starting to wear me down, so I decided to try something new. My friend Brandon suggested a different game, something more relaxing and immersive without the constant pressure of ranked matches. Brandon and I had been friends since childhood, and sharing new games had always been one of our favorite activities. The dynamic between us was light and fun. We enjoyed exploring together, discussing strategies, and just having fun without the pressure of winning or losing. That night, I was home alone, deeply engrossed in the new game Brandon had recommended. My parents had gone on a weekend trip, leaving me with the whole house to myself. It was the perfect opportunity to lose myself in the game without interruptions. As I played, I lost track of time. The new game was engaging, full of adventures and interesting challenges. Every detail seemed meticulously crafted to offer a fully immersive experience, and I was completely absorbed in the narrative. Suddenly, my phone vibrated next to me, snapping me out of the game's trance. It was a message from Brandon. "Hey, Ju, are you online? Look out your bedroom window." I frowned, puzzled by the message. Look out the window? Brandon was known for his pranks, but something about the tone of the message piqued my curiosity. I got up from my chair and walked over to the window, pulling the curtains aside. Outside, standing on the sidewalk, was a strange man. He was just standing there, staring intently at my house. It was hard to see clearly in the dark, but his posture and the way he didn't move were unsettling. A chill ran down my spine. My heart started to beat faster. Who was this man, and why was he standing there, staring at my house? I tried to see if there was anyone else around, but the street was deserted, illuminated only by the dim glow of the streetlights. I grabbed my phone again and replied to Brandon. "Are you messing with me? There's some weird guy standing in front of my house." Brandon's response came almost immediately. "I'm not joking, Ju. Lock all the doors and windows, now." The urgency in Brandon's message made me realize the seriousness of the situation. I rushed through the house, making sure all the doors and windows were securely locked. The man outside hadn't moved, and that only increased my fear. I returned to my room, feeling the adrenaline coursing through my body. My mind was racing, trying to understand what was happening. I looked out the window again, but the man was no longer there. What did he want? And why did Brandon seem to know something I didn't? The night, which had promised to be peaceful and fun, was now shrouded in a frightening mystery. I needed to figure out what was going on, and, more importantly, ensure my safety while doing so. I was sitting on the couch, trying to calm down when a distinct sound made my heart skip a beat. The intruder was knocking on the living room window. The sound was insistent and unsettling, as if he wanted to remind me that he was still there, that he hadn't gone away. I quickly stood up, my eyes fixed on the window, but the curtains blocked my view. The knocking continued, each thud echoing through the house, heightening the tension that was already nearly unbearable. I tried to think rationally, but fear was beginning to take over. As I moved through the house, the intruder began trying to force his way in through the back door. The sound of the doorknob being violently twisted and the impact of the door being pushed against the frame made my blood run cold. He was determined to get in, and I needed to act fast. My mind was racing. I thought about running outside to get help, but the idea of confronting that man again terrified me. I decided I needed to protect myself inside the house. I grabbed my phone, but to my frustration, the battery was almost dead. With trembling hands, I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's a man trying to break into my house. I'm alone, and he's at the back door, trying to force his way in. My voice was filled with panic, but the operator remained calm, asking me to take a deep breath and explain the situation. As I spoke with the operator, I ran to my parents' bedroom. It was the safest place I could think of, with a solid door and no easily accessible windows. I locked myself in the bathroom, trying to stay calm while listening to the operator assure me that the police were on their way. The bathroom felt like a temporary refuge, but the sense of safety was fragile. I could hear the intruder moving around the house, trying different entry points. Time seemed to drag on, each second stretching into an eternity as I waited for the police to arrive. I felt my body trembling, my heart pounding uncontrollably. It was dark in the bathroom, and the only light came from my phone's screen, which now displayed the low battery warning. I kept talking to the operator, trying to focus on her instructions and stay as calm as possible. Finally, I heard the sound of sirens approaching. The relief was instant, but the fear still lingered, waiting for the police to arrive and resolve the situation. The operator asked me to stay on the phone until the officers confirmed it was safe to come out. The wait felt endless, but finally, I heard authoritative voices outside. "Police, come out with your hands up!" The strong, reassuring voice of the officers brought immense relief. The intruder was about to be confronted, and my night of terror was about to end. The operator confirmed that the police were at my door. I unlocked the bathroom door and slowly stepped out, still trembling, but now with a renewed sense of safety. The experience had been traumatic, but at least I knew I was in good hands now. The police arrived quickly after I managed to call 911 as soon as I noticed the man outside my room. They entered the house with their guns drawn, ready for anything. The intruder didn't resist arrest. He was sitting in the front yard with a cut on his forehead bleeding and a distant look in his eyes, as if he wasn't fully aware of where he was. The officers handcuffed him and took him to the squad car, while another officer stayed with me, asking questions about what had happened. I told them everything, from the strange message from Brandon to the moment I saw the man outside my window. The adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, but the presence of the police made me feel a bit safer. After the man was taken away, the officers began investigating what might have led him to break into my house. That's when a surprising discovery was made. The intruder was actually a player I had defeated and taunted earlier in the game. My friend Brandon and I had made some sarcastic comments after beating him, but I never imagined it could lead to something so extreme. The revelation that he had obtained my address and phone number was terrifying. He had tracked me down through personal information he somehow managed to get online. This highlighted a danger I had never considered before, how vulnerable we can become through our online interactions. The police explained that the man was mentally disturbed and that losing the game and the taunts had probably triggered some kind of extreme reaction in him. It was hard to process all of this, but I was grateful to be safe and that the situation hadn't ended more tragically. As I reflected on what had happened, I realized how reckless I had been. Leaving the door unlocked was a serious mistake, but what scared me the most was how easily the intruder had gotten my personal information. The experience taught me a harsh lesson about the importance of being more careful with privacy and security, both online and offline. That night changed my perspective on many things. I realized that I could never be complacent about my safety, and that I needed to be more vigilant about who I interacted with and how I shared my information. Online games, which had once been a way to escape and relax, now seemed a bit more dangerous. My reflections led me to understand that the internet, despite its many benefits, also has its dangers. And while I couldn't control the actions of others, I could control my own actions and take steps to protect my privacy and security. This experience left a deep mark on me. I learned the importance of being more aware and careful in all my interactions, and to value my safety above all else. And more than ever, I learned the importance of keeping both physical and digital doors well locked.